Alright everybody, welcome back for another video of Virtual Warfare text-based roleplay fighting tutorial series. And today's video is going to be another exposed video. I won't be exposing people because, well, I won't be exposing them personally because I did a video of someone before, actually two people. One of them asked me not to speak about the fight again, and the friend of the other was kind of upset that I made a video about her friend. So, you know, I felt kind of bad and I took it down. So this video is not going to be about exposing people, but it's going to be about exposing the rule sets of Kick. I won't be exposing the rule sets per se, like Holy Order and Anti-Assault, because ultimately they were used for good, you know, to establish role play, you know, so people can have a place to role play. But people took those rule sets and used them for evil, you should say, you know, to using them to lie and cheat and, you know, cheat their way to the top to make it seem like, you know, they are good fighters, when in reality they are just using loopholes and errors in the system to make it seem like, you know, they are winners, you know. So this will be my last video about Kick. This will be my last video for season 2. Stay tuned for season 3 after this one. So yeah, you know, it's gonna be a whole new adventure. And so without further ado, let's just go. So as you know, I don't get into every single detail about the match. You know, I go into the parts that matter the most, which is usually the first incidents that happens in the match. I try to overlook them, but since, you know, I try to be a supportive role player, if I feel like the accuracy is a little off, I mention it in the post, in character. You know, I don't step out of character and say, oh, you know, this happened and oh, this happened. No, I don't do that. I state my claim during my reply, and since I don't want any argument to happen, and because I don't want to be cheated, this is so roleplay fighting is clean and everything is done in character. You know, I don't have to step out of character and say, oh, this and this and that. I could just do everything in character. You don't have to hear my annoying voice or my annoying text out of character. You could just enjoy the roleplay and that's it. You know, I just encourage everyone to follow, I guess, the same procedures, I guess, you know. I don't know. Well, let me continue what I'm talking about. So anyway, you already know that I post a video of the full fight so that everyone can see and judge for themselves. You know, I don't have to make claims and say things that's not true. You know, that's not a very wise decision to make. You know, it's called lying and cheating, and that's not something, you know, I really stand for. So I'm just going to introduce the main key points. Scroll to the parts that matter and make the points that I'm about to present. I'm going to just summarize what happened and get to the point. Like I said, I always post a video so that everyone can judge for themselves. You know, I don't sit there and splice videos and chop them up and make it seem like I'm the right one all the time. You know, I send the whole video out so everyone can judge and see for themselves. You know, so this is what is going to be the case here. So, as you can see, my opponent made the scene. It was a circus. It was nicely done, I might add. He had, you know, everything was done. The whole nine was done. You know, but if it wasn't so stressed on claiming the victory, I would have been more adaptive, because, you know, it was really cool. You know, I wanted to be a part of the circus. I wanted to let my character fight the monsters that was there. But because since, you know, I didn't want to be cheated and make it seem like I was a loser, I was a little scarce of adapting to the environment, because, you know, once you become weaker and once you become, you know, inferior to the opponent in character, it makes it seem like you're the loser, you know, you're inadequate. It is not the case, you know. But my whole point wasn't to try to win anyway. My whole point was to introduce a better way of looking at roleplay fighting, a more fair way, a more efficient way, a more official way of doing things. But unfortunately, you know, it didn't happen that way. So I did my story, as you can see, and I arrived at the tent. Now, this is the problem of the synopsis. I'm gonna just get to the point. When I arrived, I entered the tent, walked up to the arena, stopped, stood, and began charging for 10 seconds to transform. As you can see in this post, it just says the lights dimmed and stuff, and a second before I arrived. It says that everything started a second after I arrived, or taken in the context of the original words, that I arrived a second before things actually occurred. Mind you, I am the first playable character on the roleplay scene, and no other playable character is active right now. Therefore, once I introduce my character, my opponent has to coincide with my actions to legitimately place themselves in that time frame in order to react within it. Because I entered, stepped up, and charged, all of these things were part of my arrival. However, it was not specified when these things begun, alongside with my actions. Therefore, the moment of time is truly ambiguous. Now, being the roleplay fighter that I am, I aim to rule the best possible situation, but also point out the fact that it was ambiguous, of course in character. But of course, who likes to be corrected by the one they are fighting? So I took it that, quote unquote, a second before the guests arrived was a second I passed through the tent. Anything else would just be stretching it. However, here is the other problem. As you can see, it says that the chair swept me up into its embrace. Regardless if all the details of the chair is somewhere in the stance or bio sheet, the action that is given is obviously still an auto, as no attempt was made or no opportunity for me to say no was ever given. This was besides the fact, but it was something that happened, and the reason why I make these videos so people can understand certain errors that are kind of hidden from people who really don't appreciate the art, or who really don't want to look deep into the art, should I say. And these errors can either close loopholes or solve problems that many of us face today in roleplay fighting. Because I don't want people to be discouraged over, being cheated, or being copped out of a win. Even though I get cheated and tested sometimes, but, I don't want people to lose hope. These videos are used for justice for people who have a hard time dealing with people who like to cheat, and I hope these videos can tell people, hey, look, I've been roleplay fighting for a long time, and I still get cheated too, and it is what it is. People are just cheaters, so don't give up hope, Fight people who don't cheat, who are honest, and you can understand, roleplay fighting. But let me get back to the fight. So because the arrival happened the way it did, it would clearly cause an interruption in my actions. But guess what? Nothing was mentioned. Now, if there was an interruption, it would be clear as to what moment in time, while coinciding with my actions, did the circus begin. But since there was no interruption made, my arrival could have been before I entered the tent, or even after I charged for 10 seconds. But here's the kicker. When the circus began, I only had a few milliseconds to respond, or I was going to be influenced by the sound, light, and scent of the circus. Now that the element of time has been introduced by my opponent, that moment in time has to coincide with the moment of my post. Seeing how it was an ambiguous time frame, as no moment in time was given, it could have happened at any time, making the procedures invalid. However, as I said, I allowed it to interrupt a second after I entered the tent, which seemed the most fair, because, I didn't want to stretch the truth, or I didn't want to make it seem like I was the cheater. I like to play fair, so I did it in a way where, hey, you said that it happened a second after I arrived. After I arrived, which was when I entered the tent, everything happened, so I took it as that, to be fair. But here's what brought up another problem, because I accepted the influence and still blocked against it. And my opponent said, how can you hear something and not hear it? For a simple explanation, you can just cover your ears. 2, On a roleplay fighting level, after I heard the sound, I manipulated the air inside my ears to resist them from vibrating, thus blocking out the sound. I don't know how simple I can explain it. However, another point was raised, and this is the fallacy called raising the goalposts. For example, if I say, I beat Mario Odyssey, they would say, well, you didn't get all the stars. And I would say, I did get all the stars. Then they would say, well, you didn't get 100 in all the games. And then if I say, I did get 100 in all the games, they would say, well, you didn't break all the boxes. And continue to raise the goalpost to make it seem like my post or my efforts is inadequate. This is the same example done here. As it was said, you can't use willpower in roleplay fighting, but I would skip that. But it was said that willpower does nothing. You can't use willpower to stop an influence. Like being bitten by a snake. The venom goes into your veins. You can't think to just be cured. And that is true. However, if you look at the post, that is not what I did. It's clearly said that I used my willpower to focus on something else, instead of letting the sound completely render me. And same with a venomous snake bite. You can either stand there and do nothing, or you can act. The fact that I muffled the sound, which would still be the same as slowing or thinning down the process that venom enters the vein, allowed me to not be completely influenced by the full capacity of it. Oddly enough, how can you hear it but not hear it really doesn't make sense. People think it's a contradiction, as ironic as it does sound like one. This is because many roleplay fighters don't roleplay fight, they just play the role of a fighter. As they say things like, roleplay fighting doesn't have a system, and roleplay fighting is not supposed to be serious. And this is funny because I remember in 2008, when I was using the laws of exertion to bring more logic and possibilities to roleplay fighting, people were saying, roleplay fighting is fantasy, and roleplay fighting is not a science project. But today you see many roleplay fighters using science as a basis for their literature. As people today say, roleplay fighting doesn't have a system and roleplay fighting is just for fun, we can see in the future how many people will begin to take roleplay fighting seriously. But back on track with the fight, when I heard the sound, I muffled it to reduce the effects. But this is why it was said, you can't hear it then not hear it. Because many roleplay fighters believe that everything happens instantly and automatically. So the slightest moment I am influenced by the sound, I am completely captivated by a spell. So let's take this back to the snake scenario. I get bit. Despite the process of having to shut down my organs and kill me, the amount of venom that enters has to be sufficient enough to do mortal damage. Better yet, let's use the actual scenario. The drums play to start the influence. I hear a little because of reaction time, I can't just say, well, I can, but I can't just say, I sense the sound waves coming, and I attempt to block. I would never do such a thing. Like, even though it's possible, I will always try to let the opponent affect me some type of way, to whereas damage is still taken, but I still overcome that damage and still continue my initial plan. This is what I think roleplay fighting should have to lessen the blow of trying to avoid all the damages and trying to say that, oh, you didn't state this because this and that. But it was show that, look, I still took damage and I was still able to continue my attack. This is what a true role player really is. This is from my own perspective. There are many ways or many views of what a true roleplay fighter really is. But this is my view of a true roleplay fighter, and take it or leave it. But of course, people will take your words and twist them, and all this stuff. So when I say I've heard it and not heard it, of course not at the same time, because that's silly. But people would twist it that way to make it seem like I don't know what the hell I'm talking about. Excuse the language, but it felt like it was rightful to say it at that moment. Because many people think you can just simply write a story, add a little science, create a prep and intent, you are a roleplay fighter. But this is definitely not the case. That's not a roleplay fighter. Because as you can see, this person is doing the same thing and everything he's doing is completely wrong. It's okay to do these things for fun, but once you start to nitpick, it means that it is no longer based off of fun, but it is based off of a competitive system that requires certain elements to sustain a fair gameplay and a winner, which is judged by the rules and the system it goes by. Once you make rules, you say this is how a certain thing should go. And once you do this, you create a system or lifestyle that is governed by these rules. And these rules has to be followed to accommodate the system or sustain the desired lifestyle. Let me just get back to the fight, because I keep diverting away from the fight, but everything is relevant to the fight. It's not really about the fight itself, so I'm gonna just get back to that. As I said before, because of the first error, everything beyond that will be known as an inconsistency. This was explained in my other exposed video, where I stated the moment my foot hit the ground was the same moment my hand would hit my opponent's face. He said that he stepped on my foot, which means my hand hit his face, but he completely ignored that. Because it stomped on my foot and the block of my hand was done in 2 different time frames, which happened after the step, I might add, he would have got hit in the face. As I said before, once the first error is not corrected, everything falls apart. So in that fight, I continued trying to be a decent role player. He made a move that I did not understand, so I attempted to avoid it. He said it was an uppercut, and I took it as that. However, if my blow to the face was acknowledged correctly, I would have not been in that predicament. In fact, I would be the one having the upper hand. But seeing that people don't see roleplay fighting as an art, but only a means as to win-win-win, everything is used but the truth to claim a victory, and that's not roleplay fighting at all. The fighters in this video are the ones who made up these types of fighting rules and styles, or should I say, the ones who claim to be roleplay fighters, but would lie and cheat and ridicule the art by saying, there is no system, it's just fun, just to win-win-win. Overall, I had fun on Kick. Teaching and training was fun. The fighting was not, though. Unless you're in a group that's going to back you up, your words have no say. If you're not loud, slanderous, and play the bully, then you're considered weak. If you don't bow down to anyone and do what they say when they say it, they would just attack you in every possible way. My advice, if you're going to fight anyone there, find those who respect the art, who care about the system rather than just winning, who would rather learn and gain experience than to gain wins by any means necessary. That's where you will see and experience the truth, the art, the system, and the identity of roleplay fighting. Stay tuned for season 3, and thanks everyone for subscribing to my channel. Deuces!